Hey everyone, Ashley Mailloux here, back off a bit of a layoff, and it's a big weekend at Gulfstream Park. Saturday is the Grade 1 Pegasus World Cup at 1.8 miles on the main track. It's DRF's race of the day. And we're going to take a look at the field for this Grade 1. A $3 million purse is on the line. A big field has been assembled, and while a lot of the horses that were the big names in 2022 aren't in the field, there are a lot of horses here with live chances. The morning line favorite, the number 10, Cyberknife, out of the Brad Cox barn, who enters this race off a big second place finish in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, as well as some local horses such as Simplification, White Barrio, Skippy, Longstocking, and even towards the outside of the gate, last year's third place finisher, Stiletto Boy, makes his return to Gulfstream Park. Mike Smith set to ride. So it's a big field. It makes it a very interesting race to handicap. With all these horses, we'll dive in them one by one. We'll start with the horse on the rail, the number 1, Proxy, out of the Michael Sidham barn. This is a horse who I feel like as a 4-year-old really improved. Obviously, not just based on his record, but he seemed to get better with each start. And really, his last 2 races last season, both at 1.8 miles, he handled it very nicely and was in great form for the Grade 1 Clark, which he ended up winning by 3/4 of a length over West Willpower. He draws the rail in here, which personally I'm not a fan of, but you have to like the way he's trending. And Joel Rosario has been aboard those last 2. He's back aboard for the Pegasus World Cup. Directly to his outside is the number 2, Simplification, who finished 3rd last time out in the Harlan's Holiday. We'll show that replay in a couple of horses on as we get through the field here. I thought it was an okay performance from him. Obviously, the Beyer Speed Bigger was a big 103, but one positive I will say, he obviously looked a lot better returning to Gulfstream Park than he looked 2 starts back at Keeneland. Paco Lopez climbs aboard. I have to think the connections are probably going to have him involved early, and I do think the pace will be pretty good in this race. The number 3, Riding with Biden, was a late addition to the field due to a scratch that was announced earlier. This is a horse that's going to look to extend his win streak to 3 in a row. And looking at his most recent win, I'm not too sure what he's been facing at Parks. It's going to be the deepest race in his career. You go down the page, he's been in some Grade 3 races, but his work's going to be cut out for him. He is 0 for 2 locally at Gulfstream Park. The number 4, White Barrio. I want to show his most recent race. That was at Aqueduct on top in the Grade 1 Cigar Mile. You can see him. He sticks out here. He's the gray. He's tucked in on the rail. Irad Ortiz Jr. was aboard him in this race, and there was a long shot on the lead, 58-1 on Outlier, who's kind of setting the tempo in here. Mind Control took some respect in this spot. You can kind of see the trip that he gets. And in my opinion, the rail opens up beautifully for him, but there was some water sitting on the track. I wonder if that kind of tired him out a little bit. And you see the top 2 in here are more towards the middle and the outside of the track, with the winner ending up being the number 7, Mind Control. Get Her Number, who's also in the Pegasus World Cup, so 4 in here. They duke it out at the end. I do think this was an improvement from what we had seen when White Barrio was on the road at Monmouth and Parks. I just think maybe returning to Gulfstream Park should suit him well. He's undefeated locally on the main track. Has been firing some bullet workouts as well. That 1-2 back on January 13th, a really speedy drill of 59-1. And everything Sappy Joseph Jr. said about this horse is all positive in preparation for this race. Now, to his outside is a horse that I think is going to be a major player in terms of pace. I think he's going to be involved early on. That's the number 5, Defunded, out of the Bob Baffert barn. I do think he could be probably the controlling speed in here, but I do think there are other horses that are probably going to be pressuring him throughout. And this is a horse that's been pretty impressive in his last 2, most recently at that 1.8 mile distance in the Grade 3 Native Diver. I'm just curious, kind of looking at the horses he's faced. He was able to beat Country Grammar 2 starts back, his stablemate. I'm just not sure with kind of this field this year if I see him sticking around. I'm not sure in other races that he's been out on the West Coast really what he's faced. So the big thing with him, though, as I mentioned, he does have that early speed. And to his outside, the number 6, Art Collector, out of the Bill Mott barn, disappointed last time out in that Grade 2 Lucas Classic and was forwardly placed. I think the tempo for him maybe tired him out in the end, and he wants to be forwardly placed. That's basically his only move. I really just think he's going to try to be forwardly placed, and I don't think we'll have the lead in here. A little concerned about him, though, against these waters. He has been another one that's been training very well in preparation for this race. Now, the number 7, Skippy Longstocking. This is one of a few for trainer Sappy Joseph Jr. in the field. I want to show that Harlan's Holiday. I mentioned that race earlier. A couple runners exit this key prep race for the Pegasus World Cup, that being Skippy Longstocking, Simplification, and Sappy Joseph Jr.'s other horse, O'Connor. And Skippy ends up getting the lead here in the stretch and draws off pretty nicely, where other horses, I think, were in search of more, one of them being Simplification. I just think the big thing with Skippy Longstocking, this is a confidence boost. He didn't run too well in the PA Derby, finished up nicely. He is going to stretch back out in distance today, and I think it'll be interesting to see him get back to that mile and an eighth. Another horse that performed very well locally at Gulfstream Park. The number 8, Get Her Number. This one trained by Peter Miller. This is the horse that I mentioned finished second in the Cigar Mile last time out. It was a big performance, but that was at a mile. We're talking about a mile and an eighth today. I certainly have distance concerns with this runner when you look at his last 4 or 5 efforts. They've been anywhere from 6 furlongs to a mile, and I just don't see him sticking around for a big piece in the end at this distance. Number 9, Last Samurai. Bit of an outsider in here. Finished a nice second last time out at Oaklawn Park in the Tinsel. Just was defeated by a neck in there behind Ball Harbor. His record at the distance, not the greatest, but obviously last time out the distance was perfect for him. Gets a big rider in here. Frankie Dettori set to ride this one for D. Wayne Lucas. Has some faster workouts at Oaklawn Park. I'm just thinking, looking at some of these horses, Proxy, Art Collector, among others, have beaten him in the past. I think he's going to really need to step up. The number 10, Cyberknife. This is one that we mentioned, a big second place finish in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. And we'll actually show you that replay of that most recent effort at Keeneland. In terms of this race, he's coming out of some longer races at a mile and a quarter, a mile and an eighth, and his connections decided to not go for the Classic, to go for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. And he was gritty throughout in the stretch. I know he came in a little bit and did make looks like a bit of contact, but Cody's Wish ends up getting the job done just by a head. But the big thing with this horse, I think last year in 2022, he had a really strong campaign throughout, and to see him kind of step up into those waters against some really nice milers was great to see, and just to show him stick around and really had a lot of gameness in the stretch, I think is huge. Florent Drews has been aboard him for most of his career, stays aboard here, and this is going to be his final career start. The number 11, Stiletto Boy, I find intriguing as a long shot in this field. This is a horse that was second last time out behind Country Grammar in the Grade 2 San Antonio, and he raced in the Pegasus World Cup last year. He was no match for Life is Good, who was simply dazzling on the front end. Nick Sko ended up being second. They were kind of in a league of their own, but I thought he ran quite well in his first start at Gulfstream Park. He's a consistent type, not necessarily finding the winner's circle all the time. And in terms of a pace scenario, I think he's one that should be somewhat close to the pace early on. And Mike Smith was aboard last time out, and I thought he ran very well. So positive sign to see Mike Smith back in the irons. And then out of the main body of the field, we'll wrap up with the number 12, O'Connor, the final of 3 for Saffie Joseph Jr. I expected a huge performance last time out in that Harlan's Holiday, and we did show the replay a couple horses ago. And I think the big thing is I do think he did kind of come back in the stretch and tried to battle on, which is a positive sign. But he wasn't the same horse that we saw back on October 16th at Gulfstream. I thought he was absolutely sensational in his first start for the barn since coming from Chile. I'm not too sure what happened last time out, so he'll need to step up. I don't think that outside post position is to his benefit, but one thing's for certain, there should be plenty of pace for him to run at, so hopefully he'll be able to tuck in before they get into that first turn and get a good position. 10-1 on the morning line, Javier Castellano set to ride. So a lot of directions to go. What do you think from a class perspective? The number 10, Cyberknife, is where I landed ultimately in that top spot. I think what we've seen from him last year was pretty impressive. He's been, pretty game in all of his efforts. He was a 4-time winner last season from 9 starts, and I think in terms of trip, he should get a great trip in here. But if I had to look to an upset, I think the number 4, White Barrio, he's getting back to his home track. He's been very impressive at Gulfstream Park. When you look at his races last year as a 3-year-old, when we're talking about the Florida Derby and the Holy Bull, he was much the best, and he beat a couple horses in here, such as Simplification. So curious to see what he'll do on the return to Gulfstream. I think the price will be something to watch on the tote board. And then if you're playing the exotics, the number 11, Stiletto Boy, I have a soft spot in my heart for him. I thought he ran really well last year. He's a consistent type who might be able to get a share in here. And the 1, Proxy, didn't love the draw for him, but he's hard to knock off his last 2 efforts at the distance. So it's going to be an exciting edition of the Pegasus World Cup, and I wish you the best of luck.